Let's make this quick. 4 words that Meghan Markle uttered before entering an Australian children's hospital for the grossest royal stunt I have. Real royals would never do. No wonder there is revulsion around the world for the start of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's fake royal tour down under. And let's just say there's a real reason why Australians didn't bother to show. As Nancy Sidley said, look at...
4 words. Just 4 words spoken by Meghan Markle before stepping through the entrance of a children's hospital in Melbourne, Australia. 4 words that, according to a source working inside the Royal Children's Hospital, revealed everything you need to know about what was truly happening behind the carefully constructed scenes of what many are now calling the most cynical and calculated royal publicity stunt in recent memory. Those 4 words were, "Let's make this quick." And with that, the curtain was pulled back on a visit that was supposed to project warmth, compassion, and humanitarian concern, but instead left observers across Australia and around the world feeling deeply disturbed, genuinely angry, and utterly revolted. This is the story of Harry and Meghan's so-called royal tour of Australia, a trip that was never sanctioned by the British royal family, a trip that carries no official royal mandate whatsoever, a trip that was organized and packaged as though it were a working royal engagement, despite the fact that both the Duke and Duchess of Sussex walked away from royal duties years ago. And yet, here they were, arriving in Australia aboard a Qantas business class flight, a detail that, by itself, tells you something important. These are individuals who have grown deeply accustomed to private jets, to chartered aircraft, to the kind of travel that removes them entirely from the experience of ordinary people. Being seated in business class on a commercial airline was, by all accounts, a source of genuine discomfort. Multiple passengers seated near the couple reportedly described the Duchess in terms that were far from flattering, with one individual quoted as saying directly and without hesitation, "I don't like her at all. Don't come to Australia. You don't belong here. We don't want you here." That sentiment, blunt as it is, appears to reflect a broader feeling that was visible on the ground from the very first moments of the couple's arrival. The crowds that gathered were notable primarily for their absence. When Harry and Meghan emerged from their vehicle in Melbourne, the scene that greeted them was not the one their public relations team had almost certainly envisioned. The press was there, of course. The cameras were there. The official media representatives, the journalists, the television crews, all present and accounted for. But the general public, the ordinary Australian men and women and families who might be expected to line the streets to catch a glimpse of the visiting couple, they did not come. Or at least, they did not come in any numbers worth noting. Social media commentator Nancy Sidley drew attention to this with pointed observations, noting the thinness of the crowds and asking her audience to look carefully at the footage and draw their own conclusions about how warmly Harry and Meghan were being received by the Australian public. Harry, for his part, wore what observers described as performance smiles, expressions of cheerfulness that appeared studied and deliberate rather than spontaneous or genuine. Meghan, meanwhile, offered nothing to the 9 News camera crew that attempted to engage her upon arrival, and the reason for that silence, based on what has since emerged from inside the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne, may be quite straightforward. She had other things on her mind. Specifically, she had a schedule to keep. Let's make this quick. That was the instruction. That was the tone she set before walking into a ward filled with children who are among the most vulnerable people in the entire country. Children receiving treatment for cancer. Children in oncology units. Children who are sick not because of circumstance or lifestyle, but because disease has made its home in their small and fragile bodies, and who come to that hospital day after day and week after week for treatment that is as grueling as it is necessary. The visit itself, as it was covered by 9 News, was presented in a manner that many viewers found deeply propagandistic. The coverage spoke glowingly of the couple spending quality time with young patients, of bringing smiles to the faces of children receiving ongoing oncology care, of Harry and Meghan moving through the hospital with warmth and genuine engagement. 9 News described the scene as one of connection, of humanity, of 2 people choosing to invest their time and attention in children who needed a moment of brightness during a very difficult period. The coverage was effusive, uncritical, and to critics of the couple, almost embarrassing in its deference. But what the cameras captured told a different story. And here is where things become truly troubling, because what had been arranged inside that hospital, with the full cooperation of hospital management and at the direction of the couple's team, was not a quiet and respectful bedside visit of the kind that senior members of the royal family have traditionally undertaken when visiting medical facilities. What had been arranged was a staging, a lineup. Approximately 70 people, staff members, parents, and young patients, had been gathered together in the hospital atrium and asked to wait for the couple's arrival. The children, many of them visibly unwell, some of them connected to medical equipment, some in wheelchairs, some clearly exhausted by the demands of their treatment, were positioned in a way that would allow the couple to walk past them in a kind of procession, pausing briefly, offering a few words, and then moving on. It was, in the most literal sense, a photo opportunity constructed around the suffering of sick children. The public reaction, when footage and images from the visit began circulating online, was swift, sharp, and almost unanimously negative. Across social media platforms, users from Australia and beyond expressed genuine outrage at what they were seeing. Queen Esther, a prominent commentator on royal affairs, stated plainly that she was appalled that the hospital had permitted such an arrangement and called for accountability to be assigned to whoever had given the visit the official green light. Hans, another observer, asked a question that struck many people as painfully obvious once it had been posed. Why were sick children being made to sit outside their hospital rooms, in corridors and public spaces, waiting for a photo opportunity, instead of resting in the privacy and comfort of their own beds? He described the spectacle as gross, as insensitive, and as deeply upsetting to witness. The commentator, known as the Veil Between Us, was even more direct and considerably more forceful in her reaction. She wrote at length about the pattern of behavior she believed the hospital visit represented, placing it within a broader context that included the couple's presence at the site of the Los Angeles wildfires, their attendance at events connected to the Uvalde school shooting tragedy, and their ongoing association with the Invictus Games. Her argument was that Harry and Meghan have developed a consistent and calculated strategy of inserting themselves into spaces of genuine suffering and human pain, not because they have anything concrete or meaningful to offer to the people in those spaces, but because those spaces provide them with the imagery, the emotional backdrop, and the public narrative they need to sustain the idea of themselves as humanitarian figures. Her language was unsparing. She accused the couple of using the pain, the illness, and the exhaustion of vulnerable children in order to elevate and promote themselves. And she challenged both of them directly on the profound contradiction between the way they shield their own children from any kind of public exposure, insisting on total privacy for Archie and Lilibet, while simultaneously being willing to exploit the suffering of other people's children for personal gain. Taz, another commentator, approached the story from a slightly different angle, focusing not on the broader pattern of behavior, but on the specific detail of what she was seeing in photographs from the hospital visit. She noted that there was something deeply uncomfortable about the visual composition of those images, the gathered crowd, the security personnel, the photographers, the reporters, all packed together inside what was supposed to be a place of healing and rest. She described Meghan's facial expression in some of the photographs as manic, and pointed out that the visit could not be described in any meaningful sense as a private or low-key engagement. It was, by design, a public event staged inside a hospital, and the fact that it was staged inside a hospital, using sick children as the backdrop, was what made it so profoundly objectionable. Lady Colin Campbell, a biographer and long-standing commentator on royal affairs, raised a question that many others had been thinking but perhaps not expressing quite so directly. She asked why Harry and Meghan were visiting a hospital at all, given that they are not working royals. They hold no official royal function. They represent no charitable organization with any formal connection to pediatric medicine or hospital care. They were in Australia on what was, by all accurate description, a commercial visit, a trip designed to generate publicity, to restore some degree of positive public profile, and to create opportunities for the kind of brand building and platform development that underpins their post-royal commercial ambitions. Against that backdrop, the decision to visit a children's hospital begins to look not like an act of humanitarian generosity, but like a cynical attempt to blur the line between genuine charitable work and personal public relations management. Lady Colin Campbell went further, directly criticizing the hospital itself for what she described as a stunning failure of judgment and duty of care. Her words were pointed and deliberate. She accused the hospital of taking sick children out of their beds and lining them up for a photo opportunity with two individuals who, in her assessment, have demonstrated repeatedly through their conduct over recent years that they view charitable engagement primarily as a mechanism for gaining access, generating attention, and advancing their own interests. She referenced specifically their behavior at the charity polo match in Florida, as an example of the way in which they deploy the language and imagery of charitable concern while pursuing goals that are fundamentally self-serving. And she described Harry and Meghan in language that left very little room for charitable interpretation, calling them rapacious, disloyal, and motivated above all by a hunger for money and attention that they satisfy by using every person and every situation they encounter as raw material for their own advancement. Sonia Patterson offered perhaps the most historically grounded criticism of the hospital visit, making a comparison that carries significant weight. She noted that even the late Queen Elizabeth II and the beloved Princess Diana always met sick children at their bedsides when visiting hospitals. The idea that a child receiving cancer treatment should be removed from the privacy of their room, wheeled or walked into a public space, and made to wait in a crowd for the arrival of a couple seeking good publicity. This was not a practice that any serious royal figure had ever employed or would ever have sanctioned. Patterson argued that she could not think of a single other celebrity or public figure anywhere in the world who would have demanded that sick children be lined up in an official receiving formation for their benefit. The comparison to Princess Diana is particularly striking because Diana's hospital visits were defined precisely by their intimacy, by her willingness to go to where the patients were, to sit with them, to hold their hands, to be present with them in their vulnerability without any audience and without any fanfare. What happened in Melbourne was the polar opposite of that approach. Angela Levin, Prince Harry's biographer and one of the most closely informed commentators on the inner workings of the Sussex household, joined the conversation and responded directly to the exclusive reporting about Meghan's words before entering the hospital. Her reaction was one of barely contained fury, tempered by a kind of weary recognition that this behavior, while shocking to observe, was consistent with everything she has come to understand about Meghan Markle's character and priorities. She noted that children, in particular, tend to be very sensitive to authenticity. They do not possess the social training or the polite inhibitions that cause adults to mask their discomfort or their genuine responses to the people they meet. And the children at the Royal Children's Hospital, whatever age they were and however ill they were, appeared in multiple photographs and video clips to be distinctly uninterested in engaging with Meghan. Some were looking away. Some were looking at the cameras rather than at the couple. Some appeared to want nothing to do with the situation at all. Angela Levin interpreted this as confirmation of what she has long believed, that Meghan does not genuinely connect with children, that children sense this on some level, and that the entire hospital visit was therefore a performance that even its intended audience could see through. Levin also raised a point about the physical dimension of the visit that added another layer of concern to an already troubling picture. She noted that these children were extremely ill. Some were dependent on medical equipment. Some were in conditions of severe vulnerability, and yet the hospital atrium into which they had been gathered was crowded with people, staff, family members, security personnel, photographers, camera operators, and press representatives. In that kind of crowd, in a space that is supposed to be a protected and sterile environment for people whose immune systems may be severely compromised by the very treatments being used to keep them alive, the potential health risks of such a gathering are not trivial. Levin described herself as stamping around the room in anger as she processed what she was seeing, unable to understand how the decision to arrange this visit in this manner could have been made by anyone with a genuine sense of responsibility toward the children in their care. On the question of Meghan's behavior and demeanor throughout the visit, multiple observers noted what they described as a performance of emotion that did not appear to be rooted in any genuine feeling. The body language, the expressions of being overwhelmed, the studied gestures of concern and compassion, were, in the view of commentators who have spent years watching Meghan navigate public appearances, a performance and nothing more. Nancy Sidley described it directly as Meghan pretending to be overwhelmed. Others pointed to the way Meghan was gripping Harry's hand and arm throughout much of the visit, reading this not as an expression of genuine affection, but as a behavioral habit, a way of anchoring herself and centering the image of the couple as a unit rather than allowing either of them to be seen as individuals engaging independently and naturally with the people around them. The visit to the hospital was followed almost immediately by an appearance at a women's refuge, where Meghan served food to the residents. On its own, such a gesture might have been read as straightforward and well-intentioned. In context, coming directly after the hospital visit, clearly managed as part of a carefully timed schedule of engagements, and unfolding in front of cameras and press representatives who were present to document everything, it registered to many observers as yet another scene in the same ongoing production. Meghan's comment upon serving the food, asking whether anyone else was hungry, and smiling broadly at the assembled press while doing so, struck observers as revealing. The smile was directed not at the residents she was ostensibly there to serve, but at the cameras recording the moment. The comment about jet lag, noting that she and Harry had landed that morning, so the jet lag had not yet hit, inserted a detail that was unnecessary and oddly self-referential for someone genuinely focused on the people they were visiting. Later in the day, the couple visited a local museum where Australia's first poet laureate, Steve Cottle, asked them how they would like to be addressed. This question, simple as it sounds, was loaded with significance. Meghan Markle is a woman whose insistence on the formal recognition of her title, Duchess of Sussex, has been well documented. There are accounts of her expecting to be formally announced as she enters rooms, including the private homes of friends. Harry's relationship with his own titles and the royal identity they represent has been equally complicated and equally well chronicled, not least in his own memoir. And yet, when Cottle posed a question, Harry apparently shrugged and said something to the effect that however Cottle liked would be fine. Meghan, clearly sensing that the honest answer would generate a damaging headline, quickly responded with, "Call me Meg." The Daily Mail ran it as a story. The framing was of a down-to-earth woman unbothered by formality. Critics saw it differently, as a calculated response designed to generate a particular kind of positive press coverage, utterly disconnected from the woman who reportedly expected to be announced by her full title at a friend's empty apartment. Let's make this quick. That is who she actually is. The security controversy that emerged in the days surrounding the tour added yet another dimension to the growing sense that this visit was being managed in a manner designed primarily to generate maximum attention and minimum accountability. The couple's spokesman alleged that the Daily Mail, the Daily Mirror, and Sky News Australia had endangered Harry and Meghan by publishing details of their travel plans before an agreed embargo had expired. The language used was dramatic and deliberately alarming, the suggestion being that the couple's physical safety had been compromised by irresponsible journalism. Australian politicians, refreshingly unbothered by the deference that tends to characterize British public commentary on the Sussexes, responded with notable directness. One member of Parliament suggested plainly that if police resources were being deployed to protect Harry and Meghan during their stay, the couple should be required to pay for that protection themselves. Victoria taxpayers, he argued, should not be expected to fund a security operation for a private commercial visit by two individuals who pay no taxes in the state and who are conducting the visit for their own benefit. Kevin Costner, a source pointed out, was in Australia at roughly the same time conducting a similar tour, without any of the drama, the security controversies, or the manufactured crisis that appeared to follow Harry and Meghan wherever they went. The broader reaction to the Australian tour, when stripped of the propaganda being produced by the couple's supporters and amplifiers, was one of rejection. Not a loud or violent rejection, not the kind of rejection that makes for dramatic television, but a quiet, firm, and unmistakable rejection expressed most powerfully in the failure of ordinary Australians to show up in any meaningful numbers to see the couple during their appearances. The crowds that did gather were thin. The enthusiasm was limited. The sense that Harry and Meghan represent something genuinely worth celebrating, the sense that used to exist, however briefly, in the early days of their relationship and marriage, was simply not present on the streets of Melbourne. What was present was a media infrastructure determined to project the image of a successful and beloved visit, and a public that had seen enough to know the difference between the image and the reality. Angela Levin's final assessment, delivered with the authority of someone who has spent years studying Harry, in particular, with great care and close attention, was stark. She does not believe that Meghan is nervous or uncertain about the path she is pursuing. She believes Meghan is operating with a kind of cold and absolute determination, that she is, in Levin's words, going to go on and on regardless of what anyone thinks, regardless of what damage is done, regardless of whose pain is used in the process. The children at the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne, the ones who were pulled from their beds, wheeled into a public space, lined up along a corridor, and made to wait for a couple who wanted a photo. They were not the first people to be used in this way. And unless something changes, unless someone somewhere decides that enough is enough, they will almost certainly not be the last. The four words remain. They hang in the air above everything that followed. Let's make this quick. That is the truth of what happened in Melbourne. And no amount of carefully managed coverage, no number of sympathetic headlines, and no volume of Sussex squad promotion will change what those words reveal about the real priorities and the real character of the woman who spoke them. There's one more thread worth pulling before this report concludes, and it concerns a rumor that, at the time of this reporting, remains unconfirmed but has been circulating with enough persistence to warrant acknowledgement. Suggestions have also emerged that the couple may attempt to use the Bondi Beach terror attack site in Sydney as another backdrop during this tour, which, if confirmed, would represent the single clearest possible confirmation of everything their critics have been saying.